Hey, y'all. I just got out of the theater at the Belcourt Theater here in Nashville. Our spectacular. Sorry, guys, there should be a little glitch there in the beginning of the video. I just got it started and my connection went down. I just walked out of the theater here in Nashville at the Belcourt Theater, which is our art house theater in Nashville. I just saw the preview for the new Boots Riley movie, which is called Sorry to Bother You. This was one of those previews that I didn't do any research on. I didn't read anything about this movie. I don't think I even saw the preview. I'd seen the poster, but that's about it. I had literally forgotten that I was even going to the screening this morning. I had scheduled it a few weeks ago, and I'm always happy to be included at the screenings here at the theater. It's fun to go see the big releases at the commercial theaters, but it's a real pleasure, a real privilege, really, to be able to spend my morning hanging out at the Belcourt, watching, the best independent cinema that doesn't necessarily get to the big theaters. This is a movie that will probably end up getting a much bigger audience than most smaller films do because it's insane and it's great. It's a great movie. So let's start there. That's the beginning of my review. This movie is great. Gotta watch the folks here in the village. A lot of people walking around. It's a rainy day, but looks like I just missed the rain, so streets are crawling with folk. So it's a great movie. I mean, essentially, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, basically, it's a movie about a guy in Oakland, California. He's struggling to make a living. His family racism. It's a lot about classism, and it's also about the struggle for meaning within capitalist society, wherein we're supposed to purchase meaning and wear meaning and use meaning and drive around in our meaning. And of course, we find that mostly to be demeaning here in capitalist society. So it's really a movie about that. It's made by Boots Riley. Boots Riley is a rapper. He is the lyricist and the vocalist for a band called The Coop. An act called The Coup. I'm sorry, The Coup. I think it's not The Coop, it's The Coup. And The Coup is actually the soundtrack for this movie as well. Boots Riley directed, wrote, and did the soundtrack for this movie. So it's a bit of a one-man show, and it's a real goddamn good one. I'll tell you that right now. It's his directorial debut, and it's one of those movies where it's so ambitious and it's so full of energy that it's going to be real interesting to see what he does next. Oftentimes, just like with musical artists, the first film by a director might be just jammed with ideas and energy, and then you wait to see what they do next, because Riley is actually about my age. I think he was born 1 year after me. So you take all those decades of experience and work as an artist, as a musical artist, and then you transfer that creativity over into to filmmaking, and all of a sudden there's this explosion of cinematic possibility. But we'll see what happens next. But before we get there, let's talk about this movie a bit more. You have to understand about Riley is not only is he an incredibly creative guy who's got an entire career in a different field than cinema, but he also is an activist and has been an activist. He was, part of a radical labor movement as about a 15-year-old. That's another thing I relate to him with. My father was a union organizer in Detroit. We grew up in a, Irish labor family in Detroit. Riley actually is originally from the Midwest as well, spent time in Chicago and Detroit as a young man, growing up. So I think that's part of what resonates with me about this film, is that, again, it's mostly a film about class, and I really appreciate that about the movie, because for me, and I think Riley might agree, but for many people who come from this point of view, this perspective of critique of capitalism, championing of things like collective bargaining, union labor, the fight for economic justice. I think many people, who come from that perspective, they look at things like sexism, racism, a lot of the other isms that bother people in the world today, and not to make light of those things. And this movie actually takes on, issues of feminism as well, in a smart, funny way. But ultimately, a lot of times, if you're coming from this point of view, this radical labor point of view, you understand that those other isms are really just symptoms of this larger economic exploitation. The complexity of what's really going on in that exploitation, that economic exploitation that has the country and the world really in a stranglehold, is much bigger than most people are willing to explore. And if you just want to go with sound bites on MSNBC or something like that, well then yes, the women are being exploited and the people of color are being exploited, and this marginalized group is being marginalized even more, insulted in some way. And again, all those things are important in and of themselves, and not to be taken lightly. At the same time, they really need to be understood in a bigger context. And I really appreciated the way this film really focused on economic exploitation, and the games that are played, against against race, to use racism as a tool in economic exploitation, to use sexism as a tool in economic exploitation, how those things are actually part of a larger context that's complex. And I appreciate any movie that takes these things on. This movie certainly has antecedents. First people you see in the film is the dude from Office Space. There's a lot of sort of like idiocracy vibe happening in this movie. There's capitalism and its exploitation taken to the extreme. Extreme. It gets extreme by the end. The movie becomes something of a horror film by the end, which I totally didn't expect. In that way, it in some ways the movie reminded me a little bit of Get Out. There's a by the time the movie turns into a horror film, there's a scene where the protagonist is going down into the bottom of this mansion and walking down this hallway to this lobby this office at the end of the hallway, and it felt very much like the basement of the house in Get Out, and that probably wasn't a coincidence. So this movie loves other movies, and it's happy to sort of place itself, within their universe. Again, the lighting that you see in this movie reminded me a lot of the exaggerated, sort of like horrific office environment you found in Joe versus the Volcano, or even in Being John Malkovich. The movie also owes a lot to Michel Gondry. There are a lot of really cool effects and sort of like design and production in the film that reminded me of Gondry. There's a bit of a movie within the movie that's actually credited to a director. It's like Michel Rongi or something like that. It's a organizing of the name Michel Gondry, and the film within a film is like a kind of a stop motion film that using the kind of animation that we see from Gondry. There's other moments in the film that use that same sort of animation to really nice effect. So I think there's a bit of a Gondry vibe here, in a good way, a very good way. For a minute there, I got confused and started thinking, wait a second, is this a Michel Gondry movie? Just because I'm not really that familiar with Mr. Riley. It's his first movie, so it was easy just to sort of get, to be sort of like, wait a second, this isn't a Mike Judge film, is it? No. I looked up the director's name before I came here. But you feel the vibe on a lot of that stuff, and only in the best possible way. So it's a really excellent movie that combines this really, really biting, satirical, absurdist sort of sensibility that really sends up capitalism and the indignities of just trying to make a living. and everything that goes along with that, everything that supports that system, the racism, the sexism, and everything else that goes along with that. So it's a little movie in many ways that takes on very big themes and very big challenges. Again, I think a lot of times these issues, the movie even talks about how we are exposed to these issues, but how they're sort of reduced. There's the question of strikers and scabs and things like that comes up in the movie in an interesting way, and it shows how coverage of the strike turns into a GIF that's being shared online, where some digital celebrity pelts another person in the head with a can, and that becomes emblematic of the labor struggle that these people are having. The entire issue, everything that's going on, gets boiled down into this 5-second clip of this woman throwing a soda can that hits a guy in the head, and it's so funny. And they really get into that too. They get into the idea that many of the challenges that we face, the social challenges that we face nowadays, can seem overwhelming to the point where people just tune out because tuning in results in a feeling of helplessness. What can I possibly do about any of this? I'm just put my head in the sand, or I'm just going to find some type of distraction, and so the movie even talks about why it's hard to talk about these things, in the midst of doing a great job of talking about these things and making what's ultimately a very, very intelligent and hilarious, memorable film, and I think it's going to be one that's also very successful. I can't imagine not suggesting this film. I mean, I'm obviously recommending it to you guys, and I'm going to be recommending the hell out of this movie to everybody I know, because it's excellent. Period. It's excellent, and I don't know anybody, anybody who enjoys seeing a movie and love this. You don't even have to be a film lover. You don't even have to know who Michel Gondry is to Thank you. There's a lady. This is the worst driveway, or the worst parking lot in Nashville, is at Trader Joe's. I just came here after the movie to pick up some groceries. But it took me a second there to get parked in this tiny spot. Everybody's got their cars jammed right to the edge of the line here. Anyway, so the movie is excellent, and I recommend it highly. I mean, if there was 5 stars, let's say, I keep threatening to come up with a unique rating system. I have yet to do that. Honestly, I got to call y'all out, because you guys aren't really doing a very good job of suggesting to me the best way to rate these movies beyond just the regular star system or something like that. So I'll just go with stars. So if 5 stars is The Deer Hunter, if 5 stars is the original Godfather film, if 5 stars is Days of Heaven, then this movie for me is about a 3, or about a 4 or 5, 4, 4, 5, somewhere in there. It's got a lot of the things about a movie. It does what it's doing very well. It's, the jokes are funny, the scares are real, the story is entertaining as hell, while also being very, very smart. And very, very smart about things that most movies don't talk about. I really appreciate the conversation that this movie's starting. There's lots of movies that come out nowadays that want to make a comment about something about our society, or something about the challenges we're facing in the 21st century, and my voice starts to be a little sarcastic. But I think a lot of times, it's almost like protest music. It's not easy to make art that's also activism. I saw when I was looking up the little bit of information I did see about the movie. I do like to know who's directing. I do like to know a few things about the movie. There's tons of actor cameos in this, both as actual actors on screen and as voices. You'll understand why there's voices when you see the film. I don't want to give too much away, but in both those instances, you're going to see and hear a whole bunch of familiar faces and voices. It's part of the real, sort of treat of the movie. So I won't give you any giveaways about that. But when I was looking up, just the general information about the movie, just sitting in the theater right before it started, I saw that there was an article that said something about, Boots Riley thinks artists should be activists or something like that. So there's obviously a comment about the actual art activism you see in the film and the art activism that the film represents on behalf of this artist activist, Boots Riley. It's not easy though. That's not always the simple thing to do to make both. I think bringing creativity to activism is a no-brainer. People do it a lot, and they should. And I always feel like the left, at least, used to have the advantage when it came to that kind of thing. I think the left has lost a lot of its sense of humor to its own detriment. I think the left has let outrage trump, no pun intended, or every pun intended. They've let outrage trump their capacity for creativity often, and their capacity for organization. And creative organization is what's going to actually win the day. Outrage doesn't really help anybody. I think that in that way, it's an important thing to do. It's an important thing. It's an important message to get out there right now. That you have to keep the art and the creativity in the organization, but it's also important to note that it's not always easy to do that, in terms of, from the perspective of an artist, it's not always easy to somehow include that message. I think as an activist, it's vital that you include creativity and sort of dynamic ideas and the expressions of those ideas in your work. If you can't find new ways to get your messages out there and unexpected ways to put issues in front of people, they simply won't notice. So I think his message in that way is very vital and very important right now. I also think it, in and of itself, the sort of negotiating of art and activism is complicated, and it's a big subject. And so we'll have to have more discussion about that. Please comment about that in the comments. If you do have a good system for me to be rating these movies more efficiently and more uniquely, I would love to know about it. If you have seen the movie, or if you're going to see the movie, or if you were thinking about seeing the movie and now you've watched this review and it's made any impression on you, I'd love to know about it. Again, Boots Riley's Sorry to Bother You, a great movie about the trials and tribulations of 21st century capitalism, and all wrapped up in a hilarious, satirical, brilliant, somewhat of a horror film. Very, very interesting, genre bending, really great cinematic allusions happening throughout it. A really gifted filmmaker, a gifted artist who now is saying, hey, I want to do film. And lo and behold, his creativity is just as potent here as it might be in the recording studio. So so a great movie. I hope if you guys check your listings and see when it's coming to your neighborhood. I'm not actually even sure when it's coming to Nashville. I'm assuming probably next weekend. It'd be weird for them to be previewing it today and opening it tonight, but they might be. But I would look for it, check it out at the Belcourt, say within the week. And you're definitely going to want to see this one. It's 100% worth it. Take your girlfriend, take your friends. I'm not sure. It's probably rated R. It's not necessarily a family film in that sense, but it's a big time funny movie. So it's definitely one that you're going to want to see. I don't think you're going to want to miss it, and I think it's a movie people are going to be talking about. And given the success that Get Out had last year, with winning the original screenplay. I could see this one. I could see this one threatening to win original screenplay as well, or at least getting nominated. The writing is particularly great. The acting is very good, and visually, it's really a great looking movie. So a huge triumph really for Mr. Riley. Definitely, you really couldn't make a more impressive first film. So hats off to him and everybody who helped make this movie as good as it is. Very good. Sorry to bother you. I'm not sorry. I'm glad that movie made its presence known to me, and I'm glad I got a chance to see it. So on that note, I'm going to go buy some groceries, and I'm going to do my part to feed the economy with my energy and my money that I have to earn, etc. Anyway, but maybe later today I'll figure out a way to throw a wooden shoe in the gears and bring the machine to a standstill. I'll let you know how that goes in the next video. Hope you guys are doing great. It's a little rainy. It's a little bleak. It's a little weird here in Nashville. We have had a weirdly rainy summer. That's not very typical. Usually it's just broiling hot. Luckily, with this rain, we've got a little bit of a break in the temperatures. It was like almost 100 degrees yesterday. So it feels nice to be outside in a t-shirt, even if it's a little damp. But anyway, hope you guys are doing great. Thanks for tuning in, and watch for more video reviews coming up. If you guys want to follow me at Twitter, I'm at Mighty Joe Nolan on Twitter. I'm also at Mighty Joe Nolan on Instagram. On Instagram, you can follow my photography project at Pikes Project. And check me out on social media, because if you guys come along for that ride, you'll find out about all my music projects, my photography projects. I've got a new exhibition coming up in Memphis at the end of the month, and I've got a new single out called Savage Nomads. If you look on SoundCloud / Joe Nolan, JoeNolan, you'll find my new single Savage Nomads. So go check that out and follow me there as well. Peace out. Bye.